If you're running a software development agency, it shouldn't be too hard to grow. Welcome to ManagedCoder Podcast. Tune in every week to find out how to grow your software development agency and help you to solve your day-to-day problems. With 20 plus years experience running an agency, please welcome your host, Shahed Islam.
Hi, Effie. Welcome. Thank
Hi.
you for joining. We have known each other for so long. We were talking about it before the recording. And introduce yourself first.
We have known each other for so long, but I'll be formal. I'm originally from New York. I've been in the customer facing field for probably a little bit over 20 years. About 10 years ago, I moved from New York to Israel. With various leadership customer-facing roles. Within the current role that I'm in now, I'm the senior director at a cybersecurity company and building up a customer success initiative there called Adaptive Shield.
Thank you. Thank you. So, you were both on receiving end of service and also, of course, a provider. We run the blog and podcast on mostly targeting our agency client who actually wants to grow their company and go to the next level. And I think in our conversation earlier also, we talked about communication, right? Communication is a big thing, especially if you are targeting US-based or European clients, especially those who are in other countries. So what are your top three things, like if you want to give advice to an agency who is trying to work with US based client or other European client?
So absolutely, I have been on both on the receiving end. I still am. I'm a customer of many SaaS applications, many other things, but the majority of my day to day is on the giving end. We will call it. I have many clients that I've dealt with over the years, and I could tell you that probably there's so many things that I think one needs to focus on. But if I had to narrow it down, I would probably say first thing is open transparency. Things are going to go wrong. Things are always going to go wrong. And the best thing to do is being open and transparent when those things do go wrong, whether it's not meeting a deadline, miscalculating a cost of a project, something just not going right. The minute that you nip it in the bud and you're transparent with your customer, the better it is. And if you have a good relationship with your customer, they'll be pretty forgiving. But what they won't be forgiving is if you keep it to yourself and don't communicate until it's too late. And then it sort of gets worse. So that's probably one of the first things I would say. The second thing I would say is when you do meet, especially face-to-face, make sure the meetings have a point. Everyone is very busy, especially as you go up the ladder in an organization and more leadership level. Send an email, put the agenda there, and don't say just checking in on things and seeing how things are going and getting some feedback on how you feel on our project together. Be very specific on what you're looking for. Everyone's time is precious, and they'll value those meetings a lot more and tend to communicate and participate in those meetings. And finally, I would also say, again, following the line of time is valuable, always give your customers options and don't leave open-ended questions. Meaning, if you have an option, let's say you're working on a project and there's 3 different options and 3 different ways to go, don't help your customer make that decision. Say, these are our 3 options. We could go with option A, which is stored in the cloud. Go with option B, buy a server. Go with option C, have a third party, for example. And then say what you recommend and why. It really helps put you as a trusted advisor and streamline things a lot faster. If you just leave it in your customer's court for a long time and just say, you figure out what you want to do, that's not very helpful. And they'll also, like I said, trust you a little bit more and really work on that relationship there.
Thank you. I mean, on the transparency side, I want to pick your brain more on that. In early days in my career, you were my client, certain cases, and I was
That's
very
true.
poor. I would not communicate the bad news. And
I don't
that
remember
happened, yeah,
that.
yeah. And that happened to many of the people I do talk to, agency owners who are starting new. They're young. They are they have a fear inside them that they will lose this client if I tell them the bad news, right? Sugarcoating it sometime, even though nowadays, especially with COVID, everybody is remote. There is a huge demand for web development and this kind of services. And one thing I have noticed in last 1 year, even inside my team and my company, that a lot of people are living in the middle of the project, and my managers are reluctant to tell them. But once they open up, client is fine because they know the situation is like that. So little bit more, what are your advice to the younger people, or they are starting new? How do they go ahead and communicate on that?
I could totally relate to that. I think it's a complete rookie mistake to not not reveal it. I see it in agencies. I see it on even my team members. If I'm hiring someone a little bit more junior, they're always scared to deliver bad news to customers. So what I would say, like, let's take your example that you brought up. That's very common nowadays with the Great Resignation. That someone who is working on your project is no longer there, and they have all this knowledge and they have all this maybe that they took with them, and it will probably affect the project and the timeline in the upcoming weeks. So when you're breaking bad news, you should also accompany it with some good news or how you're dealing with that bad news. So for example, you could say, Jane is no longer with the company. She moved on, and I know she was a very major part of the project, but don't worry, because we have John who came aboard and we're doing a really extensive handover. He has all the history, and we'll also add leadership to it to make sure that the transition is flawless. That's an example. So always break the bad news with how you're going to be dealing with that bad news. And again, the customers are very appreciative. I think honesty is really the best policy when it comes to these things.
That connect with the other thought, that how do they communicate sometime with bigger bad news, right? Like if you go ahead and leave a message to on Slack a customer, hey, next week no work will be done because the developer left. The tone that does matter. I have seen so many times my team failed because, or I have seen the example. So what is your idea of good transparent communication, and what level, what kind of communication they should do? Like email communication is for one thing, Slack is for another thing, and voice call or video call could be another thing, right?
Absolutely. And I think, I don't want to sound really too old here, but I think especially in the younger generation, they're very used to doing that sort of instant messaging, texting, and delivering not such great news. Um, Absolutely, I've seen it happen, and like bad news is delivered on Slack. It's very hard to even communicate a tone. So sometimes things may not be bad, or sometimes a message may be conveyed a little bit differently to your customers. And I would say, it's use your judgment, but bad news that deserves a discussion, that that there's going to be not such a positive reaction from the side of the client, should always be done face to face. And send an email, and you could send a Slack saying, I need to talk to you about some major developments in your project. Can we get on a call the next day? And then communicate it definitely face to face, because it becomes a conversation. It doesn't become cold. It doesn't show. It doesn't give the impression that the agency doesn't care, because they do. And then you have a discussion about how you're going to be dealing with it, but definitely face to face.
Yeah, one thing about you mentioned that have a clear agenda. I have seen it repeatedly now. Last 10 years, things have changed. A lot of like CEO or C-level executive I meet, and they expect actually me to remember everything, right? As in, because it used to be the employee. We are no longer consultant. We are part of the team, right? So the point which you mentioned, that clear agenda, but like do we, like, what are the format we should follow? Like after the meeting, should we send an email to them? These are the things we discussed, and these are follow up. And how do you follow up with these things? Because making accountability on the client side is also important.
That's a very good point. So there are many ways to do it. I think emails after major meetings where there's decisions that are made and next steps is an absolute critical part and is a must. That is for sure. On larger projects, just like your agency does, and I think you do it, there should be some sort of SaaS application that you could basically see what's going on in some sort of board. So you can go over the history, see some open items, open tasks, and where it sits with. Is it with the client? Is it with the agency? And how long is it going to take? And that has to do, again, with the clear communication, especially when we're in this global environment and there's a lot going on. We're all working from home. There's no more let's go visit each other. Those kind of applications can be very helpful.
No, thank you. Thank you. That's very good. Coming to the second part of my conversation, which I want to shift toward the global team. Right now, like after COVID, everybody is global, even though we are sitting in the same city. And I know you've been dealing with communication within team for a while, and you are managing a team probably from Israel to other places. What are your advice to leadership team when they are dealing with global team, and what are the three things? I mean, last few years things have changed dramatically, and what are the areas you want them to concentrate?
So yeah, I was dealing with global teams even before it was common. Even 20 years ago, back when I was out in New York, I was dealing with global teams. I would probably say it's very similar to how you deal with clients. Is obviously communication is key. One of the important things to understand that when you are dealing with global teams is culture, and the same thing for customers, by the way. Especially as an American, we have these colloquialisms and things that we say, and let's table this, or let's do, or all these comments that sometimes people from around the world don't really understand how to interpret it, but we think as Americans that is very obvious. So one of the things is, even though everyone speaks English very well, to sort of keep it simple. The next thing is to try to have as many sort of summary meetings as you can. Now, I hate meetings. I'm not for it. But when you do have a global team, it's really important to sort of have that at least once a week global meeting, and try to have those communications with your team as well. It's super, super important, because especially when we're dealing with different time zones and there's someone that always has to stay up late or wake up early. Those are one of the things as a leader, you're just going to have to sort of get used to, that there's no 9 to 5. You may have to stay late or wake up early, but that's just how it is these days. In order to accommodate a global economy and a global team.
No, that's good. I mean, communication with global team, I have learned before even COVID, and I think you are so right on that point of culture, right? What is right for US culture is completely wrong. And one example I always brought, like, let's say a team member sitting in India or other countries where family is as important, right? In here, your uncle passed away, you probably may not need to take a day off, or somebody is in hospital, but for that, even though I was born in Bangladesh, but I had to learn this, that even a distant family member passed away, they have to go to the funeral and need to take a day off, and that kind of things where a lot of global leaders who are managing team from USA to India or Ukraine or Middle East or other places, they're struggling. How do you deal with it? Like as a leader, the empathy and understanding the culture. How do you learn? If you have a team in that country, should you learn some cultural point of view?
So first of all, I would always recommend, if you do have a team member from another country, to be inquisitive and get a little bit personal. It's okay. In the US, we tend to not get personal at all. I think outside of the US, it's a little bit okay to do that. Tell me about your culture. Tell me about your holiday. Another good thing to keep keep on top of, and again, as Americans, we're not so great with it, is global news. You mentioned the Ukraine, for example. If anyone has any workers in the Ukraine as of now, you know that they're on the brink of a war. So a little bit sensitivity to that when dealing with it. Because if you just jump into a meeting with someone from the Ukraine right now and don't even mention it, it could look extremely insensitive and really not take in consideration what they're going through. Another thing is holidays, for example. In the US, December is a huge holiday month. You have Christmas, you have New Year's, there's Thanksgiving right before. But we tend to forget that many places around the world, those holidays are almost, non-existent. And I've heard many times an American go on, getting on a call, even with, let's say, a customer from another country where they don't celebrate those holidays, and they'll say, "Oh, how are your holidays?" And then there are none. So a little bit of sensitivity on that end as well can go a long way. And of course, if you do have a team with that are celebrating certain holidays, go ahead and acknowledge it. Maybe send them a little gift. Know a little bit about the holidays. Some of them are as major as Christmas is. Some of them are even bigger. So that culture of sensitivity can go a long way.
Thank you, Effie. We ran out of time. Thank you for your time again. And can you tell our listener, how do they reach out to you if they can? What is the best method? Is it LinkedIn?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of LinkedIn, either from comments. I love networking. So go ahead and send me a little bit of a note. That's the best way when you do connect to me, because if you're not in my field, I'd like to know, how and why you're connecting with me. So I'd love to hear a little bit of message. Connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to reach out and network.
Thank you for your time. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Fahad.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from us, you can follow us on Twitter at ManagedCoder or visit our website at ManagedCoder.com. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.